Good morning and Shabbat Shalom.
Good morning, Barbara.
We're going to start off this morning with Hine Matov because it's nice to be together. Hine Matov u'manayim sheverachim gam yachad. 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 How good it is.
How good it is.
Sweet it is.
How sweet it is.
To be together on this day. How good it is.
How good it is.
Sweet it is.
How sweet it is.
To be together on this day. Hine Matov u'manayim sheverachim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim sheverachim gam yachad. Sheverachim gam yachad.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It is good to be together. It is good to be in a community, even when that community is spread across households all over the world, it looks like, from what I'm seeing on Facebook, but still to be together in spirit, to be together to share these words of truth and unity, to be together on in a week, at the end of a week that has been a really, really difficult week for, I think, everyone in our country and people watching around the world, and where we're hoping to find some hope and possibility in a time of brokenness, but also to sit in and with that brokenness, to acknowledge pain where it sits in our bodies, in our hearts. And so that's what we're going to do, endeavor to do this morning, and we're really glad to be doing it with you. I want to remind you to take a minute, introduce yourself in the chat. I also want to remind you that if you are looking for the Benot Mitzvah, you are on the wrong stream but the right synagogue. So you're going to want to go to our website and go to the live streaming page in the top right corner. And then you're going to go all the way down on that page to the Bearish Sanctuary stream. They're running a few minutes behind, so that stream may not have started yet, but we'll be starting shortly. So we encourage you to go check that out. But if you are looking for our chapel service, you are in the right place, and we are going to continue to warm up our voices and our souls with the words of Ma Tovu.
Umeko mishkan kevodecha
The next prayer, Asher Yatzar, is a prayer about thanking God for our bodies. And it occurs to me that our bodies are a little bit like democracies, in that we only notice them when they're not working well. We sometimes sort of take them for granted when things are going smoothly, or at least things are working for us. And it's only in the moments where something is hurting, or something is broken, or something is not flowing as it should be, or something is inflamed, that we notice our bodies. We stop taking them for so much for granted. And Asher Yatzar is a prayer about not taking our bodies for granted, especially when they're working well. There's this powerful line that we're aware that if anything were not flowing as it should be, we wouldn't have the strength to stand before God and say words of truth. And I think that we are praying for our bodies this morning, and praying for our body politic, praying for our nation and its wholeness and healing, as much as if it were our own body, knowing that when our democracy is threatened, our bodies and other people's bodies are on the line. So we offer these words of Asher Yatzar, which can be found on page 76. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who formed the human body with skill, creating the body's many pathways and openings. It is well known before your throne of glory that if one of them be wrongly opened or closed, it would be impossible to endure and stand before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh, working wondrously. Baruch atah Adonai rofecho basar umafli la'asot. We continue with Elohai Neshama, a prayer that's about our souls, but also a prayer that's about finding and catching our breath. In a long and difficult week, the way that we can begin to find our prayer is to catch our breath.
Elohai Neshama Shenatata B'Tehorahi. Elohai Neshama Shenatata B'Tehorahi. Elohai Neshama Shenatata
The Nisim B'chol Yom offers praise to God for the many miracles we have already experienced today. I want to give you the opportunity to share blessings for miracles that you've experienced today in the chat on our webpage, on our Facebook. As we move through these blessings, we'll pause in the middle and share some of those out. So if you have a blessing for a miracle you've experienced today or this week, we hope that you will share it with us. And we are going to continue with the Nisim B'chol Yom, which begin on page 80.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has given the mind the ability to distinguish day from night. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who opens the eyes of the blind. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who frees the captive. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who lifts up the fallen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who stretches the earth over the waters. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who strengthens our steps. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who clothes the naked. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who gives strength to the weary. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who removes sleep from the eyes, slumber from the eyelids.
So we pause for our own blessings. I'll go first. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. That both the twins went down for a nap without a fight this morning. It's the little thing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, that I received the COVID vaccine on Tuesday.
Amen. I am checking to see if there are any others that have been shared so far. We're always on a bit of a delay, so it's possible that you're typing right now and you just haven't gotten it out, and that's okay. But I know that you are thinking of miracles that you've experienced. I know that you are thinking of big miracles and small miracles. I know that you have missed some miracles that happened that you didn't even notice. Maybe now as you think back through your morning and back through your week, you think of them. For all the miracles in our lives, for the miracles we remember to say thank you for, and the miracles that we forget about. For all of these things, we all say Amen.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who made me in the image of God. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me free. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me a Jew. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who girds Israel with strength. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who crowns Israel with splendor. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
I thought this morning, as our moment of study that comes after that blessing for the study of Torah, we do something a little bit different. And I want to share with you a poem by the Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai. And that will be our Torah for this morning, because I think that the Torah that Yehuda Amichai has to teach in this poem is the Torah of what it means to pray for peace in a time of brokenness. And he is wrestling in this poem with the reality of peace, knowing the damage and that war does to people. And he's speaking specifically from the Israeli experience of the sort of constant animosity between Israel and its neighbors, and the impact that has had on Israel and its psyche, and he imagines the kind of peace he is praying for as a result of that. And as I was reading it this week, it struck me, this image of peace that he paints, as being a powerful message for what a healing looks like, that still acknowledges pain, that still acknowledges the long-term impacts of the destructive forces that work against peace, but still feels this Jewish necessity of peace. So I'm going to read it. I'm going to put it up on the screen. I'm going to read it. I'm going to encourage you in the chat as we read it. I'll read it 2 times through because it's short. To if there's a line or an idea that particularly resonates for you, or a response to the poem, I'm going to encourage you to put that in the chat. This will be our sort of moment of study. If we were in person, I would ask you questions about it. But since we're not, if there's something that sticks out to you from this poem, I invite you to put it in the chat. I'll read it twice. The poem is called Wild Peace by Yehuda Amichai. Not the peace of a ceasefire, not even the vision of the wolf and the lamb, but rather as in the heart when excitement is over and you can talk only about a great weariness. I know that I know how to kill. That makes me an adult. And my son plays with a toy gun that knows how to open and close its eyes and say, Mama. A peace without the big noise of beating swords into plowshares, without words, without the thud of the heavy rubber stamp. Let it be light, floating like lazy white foam, a little rest from the wounds. Who speaks of healing? And the howl of the orphan is passed from one generation to the next, as in a relay race the baton never falls. Let it come like wildflowers, suddenly, because the field must have it. Wild peace. So let's sit for just a minute with that idea of wild peace, because the fields must have it. If there's a line or a concept or something you're responding to, I invite you to share that in the chat. I'll read it one more time. Not the peace of a ceasefire, not even the vision of the wolf and the lamb, but rather as in the heart when excitement is over and you can talk only about a great weariness. I know that I know how to kill, and that makes me an adult. And my son plays with a toy gun that knows how to open and close its eyes and say, Mama. A peace without the big noise of beating swords into plowshares, without words, without the thud of the heavy rubber stamp. Let it be light, floating like lazy white foam. A little rest from the wounds. Who speaks of healing? And the howl of the orphan is passed from one generation to the next. As in a relay race, the baton never falls. Let it come like wildflowers, suddenly, because the field must have it. Wild peace. With thoughts of peace like wildflowers, like lazy white foams ringing in our ears, we're going to turn now to Psalm 150 on page 100. Offer these words of praise and possibility.
Hallelujah, 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 because you're hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Take us so far, hallelujah, the never before, hallelujah, the Hallelujah,
We continue with Chatzi Kaddish, page 106.
Yikada ve'yikada shmei Rabba ve'almadi vrachirutei ve'amlit malkutei b'chayechon yomechon u'chayechol beit Yisrael bagala u'bizman karim Me'yimeru, Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach, le'olam la'me'amaya, Yiparach, Yiparach, ve'yishabach, ve'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, ve'yithadar, ve'yitaleh, ve'yitalal, shemei d'kedusha, לעילם עם כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן מעלמה ואמרו אמן יאי לה 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 ברכו את אדוני המבורך ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד המבורך לעולם ועד.
For our Yotzer Or this morning, another poem. This one is called Brilliant Sky by Jean Jalbert. And what I love about it is I often bring poems for Yotzer Or because it's just easiest to find poetry about the beauty of nature. But those poems are often about sort of awe and wonder and joy that comes from nature, which is certainly one feeling we can get when we look at nature. But what struck me about this poem was that there is a certain melancholy when we look at nature and its vastness and the feeling of the cycles of life and death as we look at the leafless trees right now and know that again they will have leaves and again they will lose them. We can also feel a range of emotions that isn't just sort of the happy clappy nature poem. And so that's why I wanted to share this poem, Brilliant Sky, with you as our Yotzer this morning. Never between the branches has the sky burned with such brilliance, as if it were offering all of its light to me, to say, What urgent mystery strains at the transparent mouth? No leaf, no rustle, it's in winter, in cold emptiness and silence, that the air suddenly arches itself like this into infinity and glitters. This evening, far from here, a friend is entering his death. He knows it. He walks under bare trees alone, perhaps for the last time. So much love, so much struggle spent and worn thin. But when he looks up suddenly, the sky is arrayed in the same vertiginous clarity. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMeorot. And now our words of praise for God and a sense of being loved page 113. Love your neighbor as yourself, you said, and light blinded we saw that inner and outer worlds are one as you are one. You spoke and we wrote. We reached for you down the centuries, your light moving before us as we climbed, fell back and climbed again your Sinai of life. Baruch atah Adonai habocher be'amo Yisrael be'ahava.
Open up our eyes, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. Open up our eyes, open up our eyes, teach us how to live, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one more time. Open up our eyes, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Ve'ahavta is on page 116.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Page 119. Life without integrity is like loosely hanging threads, easily fraying from the main cloth. While in acts of piety we learn to understand that every instant is like a thread raveling out of eternity to form a delicate tassel. We must not cast off the threads, but weave them into a design of an eternal fabric. Each day points to eternity. The fate of all time depends upon a single moment. Michamocha, page 122.
Who is like you, Adonai? Who is like you, Adonai? Ya la la la, ya la 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 la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Michamocha ma'elim Adonai, mikamocha kedar b'kodesh, Torah tehilot, osef eleh, Torah tehilot, osef eleh. Who is like you, Adonai? Who is like you, Adonai? Ya la la la, ya la 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 la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la.
The Amidah begins on page 124. We invite you, please, to rise as you are able.
Adonai sevatai tiftach ufi agi tehillatah. Adonai, open up my lips, my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei HaKol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imachot, U'Mevi Geula Livnei V'Neihem, L'Ma'an Shemo B'Ahava, Melech Ozer Moshiach Umagen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Vezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Leolam Adonai, Mechaye HaKol Atah Rav Lehoshia, Mashiv HaRuach Umorid HaGashem, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechaye HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Berofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Bal Gevurot, Umidam Melach, Melech Mimit Umechaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah lehachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechaye hakol. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, B'shem shemakdishim oto b'shmei marom, hakatuv hayad v'yecha, v'kara ze el ze ve'amar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzebaot, Meloch kol haaretz, kevodo. Adir, Adirenu Adonai, Adoneinu ma'adir, Shimcha bechol haaretz, Baruch kevod Adonai mimkomo. Echad hu Eloheinu, hu Avinu, hu Malkeinu, Mosheinu, ve'hu Yashmi'enu, merachamav le'enei kol chai. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Tzion, Ledor vador, Alleluia. Ledor vador avigod lecha, Unetzach netzachim kedushacha nakdish, V'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush, Leolam vaed. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh.
A blessing to sanctify this day of Shabbat. On top of page 135. We offer thanks, O God, for this Shabbat, which unites us in faith and hope. For Shabbat holiness, which inspires sacred living. For Shabbat memories glowing even in darkness. For Shabbat peace born of friendship and love, we offer thanks and blessings, O God. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. We continue with a prayer for gratitude. Modim anachnu lach.
For this tiny rock spinning in space, for the stars to know that light our way, for the promise of the human race. and doubt to hope, for finding strength we did not know. Moji manachnu lach, Moji manachnu lach, Moji manachnu lach, Moji manachnu lach, Moji manachnu lach. Try that Moji with me. Moji manachnu lach, Moji manachnu lach, Moji manachnu lach, Moji manachnu lach. For all who stand with those in need, in the face of true adversity, for freedom and justice and dignity, and the oneness of humanity. Moji manachnu lach, Moji manachnu lach, Moji manachnu lach, Moji manachnu lach, Moji manachnu lach.
Our silent prayer is often framed with prayers for peace, before and after. It's said that even though on Shabbat we don't ask God for things because it's God's day off too, we ask God for peace because our need for peace never takes a day off. And in this week of unrest, in this week of things that might have seeing things on TV that might have seemed unthinkable or unimaginable, even if they weren't always surprising, our prayers for peace are even more important. So I want to offer one more poem. I swear it's the last one of the day. This poem's by Wendell Berry. It's called "To My Granddaughters Who Visited the Holocaust Museum on the Day of the Burial of Yitzhak Rabin." And the poem will serve as our prayer for peace, and after that we will have some moments for silence and our own prayers of our hearts and our own expressions of gratitude. And then we'll come back together for us, Oseh Shalom, another prayer for peace. So here's the poem called "To My Granddaughters Who Visited the Holocaust Museum on the Day of the Burial of Yitzhak Rabin. Now you know the worst we humans have to know about ourselves, and I'm sorry. For I know that you will be afraid. To those of our bodies given without pity to be burned, I know there is no answer but loving one another, even our enemies, and this is hard. But remember, when a man of war becomes a man of peace, he gives a light divine, though it is also human. And when a man of peace is killed by a man of war, he gives a light. You do not have to walk in darkness if you will have the courage for love, you may walk in light. It will be the light of those who have suffered for peace. It will be your light. Baruch atah Adonai hamvorech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. We take a few moments now for silent prayer.
say shalom bimromav. הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו
We come now to Seder Kriyat HaTorah, our service for the reading of Torah. We begin with words celebrating Torah, Romamu.
רוממו אדוני אלוהינו וישתחוו בהר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו וישתחוו בהר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו וישתחוו בהר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו וישתחוו בהר קודשו.
So, a few thoughts about this week's Torah portion. This week we are reading Shmot, the very first portion of the book of Exodus. There's a lot in this portion. I don't know if rabbis are supposed to play favorites with Torah portions, or if that's like playing favorites with your children and you're not supposed to do it. But I love this portion, and not only because it is jam packed with stuff. We get everything in the Moses story through the burning bush, which is just like a lot of content. But also because I think that this portion has a lot to teach us about what it means to offer spiritual resistance in times of turmoil and trouble, and when you see injustice in the world. And actually, the person who offers that spiritual resistance is not Moses. Moses, at least in this portion, sucks, for lack of a better word. He kills a guy. He runs away. Those are first introductions to his character, and whether or not who he kills, we're still seeing him. Like our very first scene with him as an adult is as a murderer, and so he is not someone to be looked up to. He grows as a person over the course of the Torah. He is a complicated figure who also has a lot of stuff. That anger problem that we see in this portion continues to act up for him his whole life. He's a complicated figure. But and maybe I'm going to get flack for disrespecting Moses. He's generally loved by the Jewish tradition, but he's got some complexity to him. But who we see in this parsha who offer spiritual resistance are 5 brave women, and that and what they do is smaller than what Moses does. They don't lead the Israelites out of Egypt. They don't talk to God, although some traditions say that Miriam also was a prophet and had prophecies from God. But for the most part, they just do what they need to do to resist in all the ways that they can resist big and small. So I want to talk for a minute about those 5 women because I think they are incredible. And so I'll share my screen a little bit. I'm just sort of going to go through the text in order because I think it has a lot to say and a lot to teach us and a lot that speaks to this moment in our world. So, the first of these people that we meet are the midwives, who are named Shifra and Pua. and Shifra and Pua are described after this sort of order that the Pharaoh makes, that says that when so he calls together the midwives and he says, when you deliver Hebrew women, look at the birth stool. If it is a boy, kill him, and if it is a girl, you can let her live. So this is the Pharaoh's sort of latest plan for his genocide, is to order the midwives to kill him. The midwives are described in this verse, in verse 15, as Hebrew midwives. And there's some ambiguity in that phrase about whether they were Hebrews who were midwives, or whether they were midwives to the Hebrews, whether they were Egyptians or whether they were Israelites. And different commentators take different sort of routes with that. And I tend to think that they were Egyptians. I think that because of the way they sort of speak to Pharaoh later, and they describe the Israelite women, it seems to me that more likely that they were Egyptian. I think it's interesting both ways, but I like the idea that Shifra and Pua, the first two people to stand up to Pharaoh's injustice, were Egyptians. Right, the Israelites who've known slavery for almost 400 years, they may or may not choose to stand up to their own oppression, but the first two people to stand up are allies, are women who receive an unjust order and don't for a minute think about doing anything but the right thing. Right? It says in the next verse, in verse 17, the midwives, fearing God, did not do as the king of Egypt had told them, and they let the boys live. There's not a second of hesitation. We're not given a scene where they discuss it and say, should we do the right thing? They don't equivocate. They just do what they know to be right. And then they do something even more incredible, which is they get summoned in front of the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh says, I gave you this order, what the heck? And they say to Pharaoh, oh, the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous. Before a midwife can come to them, they have already given birth. They make up this lie. I don't know how much Pharaoh believed their lie, but they certainly seem to get away with it because God blesses them and makes them a part of sort of the broader Jewish community of Israel as a reward. But they stand up to authority with the means that are available to them. If they had said, yeah, we're not going to do that, Pharaoh would have had them killed. So they use their ingenuity to come up with the means that is available to them to offer the resistance they know they need to offer, and to do what they know is right. And as such, they are rewarded as becoming a part of being blessed by God and becoming a part of the Jewish people. So Shifra and Pua are our first heroes of this story. The second one is Yocheved, Moses' mother. I'm fascinated by the fact that the second chapter starts off with this phrase, a certain man of the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. And then it focuses on the woman. The guy, dad, is like never a part of this story. Dad makes no appearances. Mom has a role. And her role is she decides she is not going to do what Pharaoh has ordered. After the failed attempt with the midwives, he just says, all right, well, any boy that's born will get thrown into the Nile. Either you can do it or my guards will do it, but that's what's going to happen. And Yocheved doesn't do that. And for 3 months, she's able to hide her baby boy in her house. And think about how terrifying those 3 months had been. What the cost would have been to her for disobeying Pharaoh's order if it was found out. There's some discussion in the commentary about why 3 months. Some of the commentators speculate that maybe Moses was born early, 3 months early, premature. So she was dealing with a premature baby for those 3 months, and that it was only when around her due date that the guards were going to show up and say, all right, well, it's time to do this dirty deed. And that was when she knew she had to put him in the Nile. There's another commentator who says, I think that idea is stupid because how would the guards know when she was due? Which I think is an interesting meta commentary they're having with each other. But Or there's a possibility that sort of at 3 months babies start to cry more or cry louder. But the most heartbreaking answer to that question in the commentary is that one of her neighbors turned her in. The Israelites and Egyptians lived side by side. We know this from the fact that as the Israelites are moving there, leaving in a couple of chapters, they are able to go to the homes of the Egyptians. There, it's clear from the way that Exodus is written that the Israelites and Egyptians are living in the same neighborhood, neighbors to each other. And one of the commentators imagines that someone turned her in, and that is also a story we know. We know from stories like the Holocaust of both people who did the right thing and offered resistance, Jews and especially righteous Gentiles who did the right thing. And we know of people, neighbors, who were also collaborators or who chose to turn over their neighbors. And so Yocheved has to do something with this baby boy that she's protected for 3 months. And it says, when she could hide him no longer, she got a wicker basket for him and caulked it with bitumen and pitch. And she put the child into it and placed it among the reeds by the banks of the Nile. So here's an interesting thing that I realized as I was reading this year, which I had never noticed before. When I was in religious school, what I was taught was that she sends this basket down the Nile. And that is an interesting act, that she sort of would sort of send it floating down the river, and with sort of hope in her heart and the possibility that he might be saved. But that's not what the Torah says. The Torah says she placed it amongst the reeds in the river. She found a spot where it wasn't going to move. Exactly the opposite. This image from like Prince of Egypt is it's floating down the Nile and almost getting eaten by alligators and it's protected. But that's not what the Torah seems to say. The Torah seems to say she put it in this safe spot. And I have to believe from that she knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that this was a spot where the wealthy women of Egypt's royal elite came to bathe. The commentary says she hides it in the reeds in such a way where if you're walking along the banks of the Nile, you can't see it. But when you're in the river itself, you can. So she puts it in this place where she is making this bet that there may be someone who comes to take pity. I don't know that she thought it would be the daughter of the Pharaoh, but there's someone who will come and take pity. And I think it's interesting that she chooses the Nile, which the Egyptians understood to be a source of life. And maybe it's a bet she's making that this is a way to preserve his life. But also, she puts him in a bathing area. She puts him where she knows that someone will come. They will be taking their bath and they will see this baby. And that's exactly what happens. The daughter of Pharaoh comes down to bathe in the Nile with her maidens walking along the banks of the river. They can't see this baby because they're walking along the banks of the river. But the Pharaoh's daughter is all by herself. She is naked, bathing in the river when she sees this basket, and she sends her servant to grab it and bring it to her. And I think that that's not accidental, and I think that that may be part of Yocheved, Moses' mother's plan, which is that she is vulnerable, the Pharaoh's daughter, at that moment. She is like literally and sort of figuratively naked. She opens this basket, she looks at this baby boy, and she has this human connection that she might not have felt if she was up on the road in her fancy clothes with her princess crown and her gold bracelets. But because in this moment she is just nakedly human, when she opens that basket and sees another human, her heart is drawn to it. And here again is this Egyptian woman. And not only any Egyptian woman, the daughter of the Pharaoh, the daughter of the man who made this decree, who chooses to defy her father. The Midrash says that her servant said to her, like, even when some people disobey a law, like you're supposed to obey it if you're the daughter. They call her on it. And she also doesn't hesitate. And the Torah says there's this sort of interesting order of how this happens. She opens the basket. This is verse 6. She sees that it's a child, a boy, crying. She takes pity on it, and then she says, this must be a Hebrew child. before she knows exactly what's going on. First of all, she's not like, I wonder what this baby's doing here. She knows why that baby's there. She knows instantaneously that it's Jewish. Commentary says that she can see that he's circumcised. But before she relates to it as an Israelite, as a Hebrew, she relates to it as a human, a baby who is crying out. She sees the humanity crying out to her. And in that moment, she answers with her own humanity. And she doesn't hesitate for a moment. She knows that she is going to take care of this child. She even said, it's interesting to me that she doesn't think this must be a Hebrew child. She says this must be a Hebrew child. She is already saying to her maidservants who can go and gossip about her in the court, like, this is a Hebrew child, and I'm going to do what's right. So that's the fourth woman in this story. And the fifth woman in this story is Miriam. The tradition says that she was about 15 at this time. She had been hiding in the bushes to watch what happened to Moses. And the minute that the Pharaoh's daughter, who isn't given a name, and I'll talk about that in just a second, the minute that Pharaoh's daughter says this must be a Hebrew child, Miriam bursts out of the bushes, and her approach to the daughter of Pharaoh is fascinating. She doesn't say, Your Highness. She doesn't have any honorifics. She just starts talking to her like they're old friends, right? And with the courage that Miriam shows in that moment to speak to the daughter of the Pharaoh while she is bathing, while she is doing this illegal act, is powerful. And again, both Pharaoh's daughter and Miriam know what's up here, right? There is a coyness to this exchange that is fascinating. Miriam says, shall I go and get you a Hebrew nurse to suckle this child for you? And Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says that there is a sort of there is a winking implication that Pharaoh's daughter knows exactly which Hebrew nurse Miriam is going to go and get. And Pharaoh's daughter says, yes, absolutely, you should go do that. And so Miriam goes and brings Yocheved. Now Miriam, Yocheved, and the daughter of Pharaoh are all in this scene together. And the daughter of Pharaoh says, take this child. The commentary said the Hebrew word is helichi, and the commentaries play with that and say that it could be read as helichi, take your child. This is your child. She knows it's her baby, but now Yocheved has a cover story. Now Yocheved can say, this is my baby. I'm just a nurse for some Egyptian rich woman's baby that I'm taking care of. She has a cover story that she's able to be with her own child. And Pharaoh's daughter even offers to pay her wages, right, to cover the expenses for this baby. And then the last and maybe most radical verse. When the child grew up, verse 10, she brought him to the Pharaoh's daughter. Yocheved brings him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who made him a son. She doesn't have to do that. She doesn't have to keep that promise months, years, I don't know how long later, to take care of him. She could have said, no, we're good. Let's never speak of this. But she adopts Moses as her own son, even though there's a great risk to her person. And she names him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. She gives him his Hebrew name. Naming in the Torah is a really important responsibility, often reserved for parents or God or angels. But here, Pharaoh's daughter, this Egyptian woman, gets to give Moses his name. And while Moses, the tradition says, there's a midrash that says Moses had many names, but the one he is known by throughout the whole Torah, the one that he's used most often, is not the one his mother gives him, but the one that the daughter of Pharaoh gives him. She names him Moses. As I said, she isn't given a name in the Torah. The rabbis relate her to a quote from the book of Chronicles that refers to someone named Bitya, who was a daughter of Pharaoh. And so they say that her name is Bitya or Batya. Batya is a Hebrew word meaning daughter, Bat of God, Yah. And the Midrash says that the reason she has the name Batya is that God says to her, just like you took care of Moses, who was not your son, I'm going to take care of you, even though you're not my daughter. And so she's given this name. So Shifra, Pua, Batya, Yocheved, and Miriam, these 5 women who engage in these acts of rebellion, small rebellions, against injustice. Small acts of defiance where they do what is right, they act with certainty, they support each other, they communicate with each other, they help each other to plan and devise and stay safe. I like the idea that as Moses was growing up, Shifra and Pua were around. One tradition says that Miriam and Yocheved were also midwives, so that maybe these two brave Egyptian women were like friends of Moses's mom, and he knew them, and he knew the stories about how they saved people. And when Moses learns that he is going to have to be a person who saves people, who stands up for what's right, he learns it from these five women, from Shifra and Pua and Yocheved and Miriam and Batya, these women who act with certainty, who act with clarity, who act with bravery, who act in small ways, all for the purpose of fighting against injustice, for doing what they know to be right, and for acting in accordance with what they understand as God's will. And so as we navigate this world in this really strange and heartbreaking and terrifying time, I hope that we can draw strength from Shifra and Pua and Batya and Yocheved and Miriam and their story of moral courage in the face of darkness, hope in the face of injustice, action in the face of overwhelming odds, to find our own strength, our own courage, and our own action in these times. So my blessing for our Shabbat today is that Shifra and Pua and Batya and Yocheved and Miriam, may their memories be for a revolution. With that, we are going to read just a little bit of that. So I was going to read starting at verse 5. I can share the screen again so you can follow along if you'd like. A little bit of Torah read. ותרד בת פרעה לרחוץ על היאור, ונערותיה הולכות על יד היאור, ותראה את התיבה בתוך הסוף, ותשלח את אמתה, ותיקחיה, ותפתח ותראהו את הילד, והנה נער בוכה, ותחמול אליו, ותאמר מילדי העברים זה, ותאמר אחותו אל בת פרעה האלך, וקראתי לך אישה מנקת מן העבריות, ותניק לך את הילד. ותאמר לה בת פרעה לכי, ותלך העלמה, ותקרא את אם הילד. We turn our prayers now to prayers for healing, for those who are in need of healing of body or spirit. We offer these words of Misha Berach on page 253.
May the source of strength, oh bless the one with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, and let us say,
So when Rabbi Andrea Weiss came in 2019 to be our scholar in residence at Emmanuel, one of the things she talked about was the project that she had worked on in 2016 called American Values, Religious Voices, where she got 100 Bible scholars of different faiths to write 100 letters, one letter each, that they sent for the first 100 days of the Trump administration to the Trump administration and the Congress, declaring the sort of religious values that that undergird American democracy and justice, and that they hoped would inform the decisions that the Trump administration would make. And I just learned this week that I'm very excited that they are doing it again, that they are going to be sending 100 new letters to the Biden administration. If you are interested in getting that letter in your email box every day as this little very interesting interfaith exercise, you can go to valuesandvoices.com and you can sign up to receive the letters that will also go to President Biden and Vice President Harris and to the Congress. And one of the things that Dr. Weiss did was when this was 2016, after 2016 was right when we were ordained, and she was our beloved professor, and we asked her to give the prayer for our country at our ordination, because she was working on this project. It was this incredible project that we were all very proud of. And so she, instead of writing her own words for the prayer for our country, she took lines from some of the most powerful of the letters, and she strung them together into a blessing, that it was a prayer for our country. And I wanted to share that prayer for our country with you today. Anybody who is on the Union for Reform Judaism's call yesterday before Shabbat heard her read these words, but I wanted to echo them this morning, knowing that our congregation has a relationship with Dr. Weiss, and an encouragement to check out these letters as the new administration begins. But this is a beautiful interfaith prayer for our country, which feels like this week is a week where offering some prayers for our country is valuable. Every inch of America is sacred from sea to shining sea. There is much to be done in our time, the sort of hard work on which God smiles because it is done for the sake of dignity and the well-being of all God's creatures. Together, let us work to preserve and make manifest the values upon which our democracy was founded. The task of all people of faith is to call governing authorities to fulfill God's purpose of bringing about justice, mercy, and peace. Individually and as a nation, may we heed our obligation to each other as we navigate the tensions of building a just society. Rather than a politics of divisiveness, may we move our country toward a politics of empathy. May we use our power well, so we do great things for all God's creatures, all those made in God's image who yearn for an equal place at America's table. If we do all this, may grace and peace be ours in abundance. May we be a beacon and a blessing to the world. We say together, Amen. A few brief announcements this Shabbat. We hope you will join us this evening at 7 p.m. for our monthly Havdalah for All, featuring Cantor Simmons and Barbara Lozer. Anything particular we should look forward to for this Havdalah for All, Barbara? You're muted. You're muted.
Our theme is new beginnings.
Oh, I know a song about new beginnings.
Yes, we're going to sing that song actually.
Oh, good. Okay. Great. So join us for Abdallah for All. You do need to register online so that you can get the Zoom link for that. We hope you'll join us. And then tomorrow at 7 p.m. on Sunday the 10th, we are partnering with the National Council of Jewish Women and their NCJW Houston chapter to bring a program called Roe v. Wade, Jewish Faith and Jewish Action. We will hear some from Rabbi Silk about Jewish views, traditional text-based views on abortion, and I will be engaged in a conversation with Sheila Katz, the CEO of NCJW, around sort of their work in advocacy and around the broad issues of reproductive justice in our day. It should be a really fascinating conversation. Again, you do need to register online. It will not be live streamed, but you will be sent a link for the webinar. So we hope you will join us for that 7 p.m. tomorrow. And finally, just a reminder, we're in phase 2 of our reopening plan, which means we do not have public Shabbat worship. So you can continue to join us in all the ways that you've been live streaming, and we will continue to update the congregation as that situation changes. With that, we are going to move now to a moment of memory to offer our prayers of sympathy and hope for those who are remembering loved ones lost in recent days or in years past. And we are sending sympathy particularly to the family of Mordo Becker, who was laid to rest in recent days. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, and those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, life and death. We take a moment now for silent memory. We rise together as one community for the words of Mourner's Kaddish on page 294. Kadal vit kadash me rabba, be'alma divrach yute ve'almich malchute. B'chayechon v'yomechon u'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'galau v'izman kari ve'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mivorach le'olam omei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei. V'yithadar v'yithale v'yithalal shmei d'kudsha brichu. Le'ela mim kol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'ne'emata. Damiram be'ama v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mramav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Oseh shalom bimramav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen.
And we move to Kiddush and Motzi. A little bit of Kiddush on this Shabbat morning.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. L'chaim.
L'chaim. And Motzi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam motzi lechem min haaretz b'te'avon.
B'te'avon. Our closing song this morning is Gesher Tzarmaod. Okay.
Yes. Good guess. Kol ha'olam kulo Gesher Tzar Meod, Gesher Tzar Meod, Gesher Tzar Meod. Kol ha'olam כולו, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. והעיקר, לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, לא לפחד כלל. יאי לי לי
God, source of blessing and truth, help us to heed the call of those who came before us who fought for justice in big ways and small ways. Midwives, the mothers, the helpers. Help us to be like Shifra and Pua and Yocheved and Batya and Miriam, who were brave in the face of injustice. God, we ask that you bless this broken land that we love, land of unfulfilled promises, land of unequal distribution of opportunity, land of unrealized potential and dreams deferred. Bless us that we may find wild peace, peace that grows in our hearts and then in our world. Bless us that we may find justice and equality. Bless us that we may be sources of truth and love in this world, that we may know a day in our time where all can be equal and all can be at peace. For all the blessings in our lives, we offer gratitude, and we say together, Amen.
Amen. והעיקר, לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר, לא לפחד כלל. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat